Karina Akira Rainey asks,
what's Korea's take on mental illness? I wanted to know if it's a stigma, how people are treated, and is it a taboo? Well, the first thing we should say is that we're not experts in this field whatsoever. We could only talk about our personal experiences on the matter as people who are teachers in Korea and as people who have friends in Korea who have dealt with this topic before.
So first we're going to talk about our experience as teachers in Korea.
Yes.
And for those of you that don't know, we were actually teachers back in Canada. So we had a lot of training to learn how to identify students in our classroom that might be struggling with something, for example, like ADHD or autism.
We had specific courses to teach us about this.
So when we came to Korea, we were actually really surprised to find that we had students in our classrooms that were definitely going undiagnosed. Students with ADHD that were just being called, you know, troublemakers who can't concentrate and who bother everyone in class. And I would take aside my coworkers and be like, no, I'm pretty sure that the student is suffering from ADHD. They've got all the signs and they're a good kid. And they're just like, no, they're troublemakers with bad grades.
They're bad kids. I remember personally, I once had a student who, when I had a face-to-face test with him, I tried to look him in his eyes, but his eyes would go all over the place like this. Like he couldn't actually have eye contact. His eyes were like physically shaking like this. And then afterwards, when I spoke with the teacher about it, I said, you know, do you know anything about the student? Is there any way that we could help him? Has he been diagnosed with anything whatsoever? And the teacher's like, what are you talking about? He's fine. No, he's just a little bit distracted, that's all.
I had 2 students in my class over 3 years that were autistic. One, which was a really severe case, who you couldn't actually touch her. She would like freak out and she could barely speak Korean, let alone English. And she was being put in class and all the other students were kind of treating her like wangda, like she was kind of like this
the outcast.
The outcast student. And she was really struggling.
But there was no assistance offered to her whatsoever. They just threw her in there, be like, go ahead, fend for yourself.
Yeah, interestingly, when I talked to my teachers about it, they said that the reason she's at our school is because she was treated much better by the students at our school who just ignored her. While when she was in public school, she was actually like beat up, people threw rocks at her. Like, that's friggin' awful, okay?
And what bothered us as teachers in both of our schools was that there were no guidance counselors for any of these students. There were no special ed courses. Pretty much there was nothing for these students whatsoever. No help at all.
And I'm not even just talking about students that are struggling from something, just students who are struggling from life in general. Considering that there's a really high suicide rate for teenagers in Korea, they really need an output, someone that they can talk to that's like a safety zone. A guidance counselor, I think, is a critical job.
I'm really surprised that it's not actually implemented in Korean schools yet.
If I could make like one wish about a big change in Korean high schools, it would be the addition of a guidance counselor that could help students deal with stress. And that plea comes from someone who has experience with counselors. I definitely saw counselors in university when I was like battling with depression. And if it wasn't for those counselors in university, I would really not be the same place that I am today.
So not only is it really difficult for students to be treated or diagnosed in school, it also carries on into adult life where it's very difficult to get like proper treatment as well.
Yeah, now the thing is that like it does exist in Korea. There are psychologists and psychiatrists and there are counselors, but it's not really as embraced and as accepted as it's become in North America.
Common, no.
If you were to say to your friend, like, I'm really depressed, I feel really down, I'm having suicidal thoughts, people would be like, you need to see a counselor, we need to help you find someone to talk to. That would be the normal response. But in Korea, people don't really talk that much about it. If you wanted to go to talk to someone about your issues, it actually goes down on your medical record, and then if you go to get a job at a big company, they will look into your medical records.
Isn't that absurd? Like, if you want to work for like Samsung or LG or whatnot, it's not just like you give like a cover letter and a resume and an interview. They check your medical record, and if it winds up showing that you have any kind of history of mental health, you will not get the job.
Yeah, because why would they pick you over someone else who looks like they don't have any problems but might have tons of problems?
But just the idea that these companies can look into your medical health is just absurd to me.
I know. So it's something that I think needs to be worked on, because I think everybody at one point in their life goes through a struggle. They go through depression, or they're stressed out, or they have problems. You don't think that it wouldn't benefit them to see a counselor? And FYI, in a similar vein, when you apply for a job in Korea, they actually ask you for a picture. So a lot of foreigners that apply for jobs in Korea are like, oh my god, this is racism, you can't ask for my picture, but everyone in Korea does it. It's not just a foreign thing.
And they Photoshop it as well.
And
so
they get glamour shots.
You know, like if I was to apply for a job, I'm just gonna give them a picture of David Beckham, and then when they see me, they'd be like, yeah, it's David Beckham.
They hold up the picture and they pull it down.
Now, when it comes to our personal experience, we have had friends who have had difficulty with this as well. Foreign friends and Korean friends. Our foreign friends have had a real difficult time finding counselors here in Korea that speak English. But this was a couple years ago. I'm not sure if things have changed since then. I hope that it's changed.
I'm pretty sure the best place they were able to find was a Korean university, who apparently they have some psychologists or counselors that you can talk to, but they didn't speak English. So that's not very helpful when it's kind of crucial to speak and communicate. That's a major key.
And we can expect them to speak English because
Yeah, of
like it's
course.
not like English is the first language here, but like he was having difficulty finding someone to speak his language.
For my Korean friend, I was really upset about it because they opened up to me after getting to know them for like 3 years, and they couldn't even tell their employer where they were going because they were going to get medication for their depression, but they couldn't mention that to their employer because their employer wouldn't want them to work anymore. So they had to make up all these excuses as to where they were going.
And
That
it's
was
also
really
the issue
stressful.
that like the boss is really badgering your friend, like, where are you going? Tell me where you're going. Why don't you tell me where you're going? And your
Yeah.
friend will actually like stand her ground against it.
The last thing I wanted to say is that Susie was telling me about how in the morning there are a lot of like shows now that deal with like counseling. So like fighting couples, going to counseling offices, or like people who can't deal with their out of control kids. So I feel like there is kind of like a push coming on the acceptance of counselors being an important part of Korean life.
It's still not fully there, but
Still taboo, right?
it's still a little bit taboo, but it's developing. We're going to talk a lot more about this in the blog post, so click on the link here if you want to see more of our thoughts on the topic. So that's it for this week's TLDR. If you have a question for next TLDR, leave your question in the comment section below.
Or check out questions that have already been asked and you can thumb them up to bring them to our attention.
And don't forget to subscribe for more TLDRs where we talk about stuff about Korea. I'm pretty sure we're just going to end this with a blooper reel of you trying to pronounce the person's name at the beginning.
I know it's Karina Akini. I know Akira. Karina Akiri Radius.
Akira!
Karina Akira. Akira! Like the anime.